Dr. Hamid. Her name is Jennifer Drew, and she's with the Angels, Angeles Clinic, and she works with survivors, and let's give her a hand.
Hi, good afternoon. How's everybody's energy? I know we're at the after lunch presentation right now. Okay, so this presentation is really about coping, and it dovetails onto what Dr. McConnell and Dr. Arnett were talking about in regards to mind-body medicine. And I said to Dr. McConnell when she left, I'm like, thank you for the segue, because I actually talk about Viktor Frankl. So it was a beautiful transition to kind of lead into our talk today. And I'm hoping if you have any questions along the way, please stop me, interrupt, ask any questions, and let us know what's been working for you. And let us know how things are going. So if there's anything that comes along the way, please don't hesitate to kind of raise your hand, shout out and let me know what I can do or what question I can answer. So today we're going to be talking about coping. We're going to be talking a little bit about survivorship, because survivorship is a term that we've heard, and I like to reframe it. I would prefer the word thrivership. So how, even in the midst of an OM diagnosis, can we thrive? And similar to what our previous speakers were talking about, is that how we respond to something really determines what's going on in our body, in our nervous system, and it's not just being on the other side of treatment. So in today's model of treatment, thriving in the midst of treatment doesn't necessarily mean that you're complete with treatment. So we can look at this as thriving even though we're still in treatment or in conjunction with being in treatment. So there's maintenance treatments, there's active treatments, and we have the opportunity to choose how our path goes. And so there are actually patients who might be in treatment throughout the entire course of their diagnosis and their lives. There may be people who are on maintenance for the entire course of their lives. But there is a desire or a need to get on with life, even though your diagnosis is also a part of your life. So if we look at the word health, health is a really interesting thing, because a lot of times in our view of the world in the West, we've taken health to mean just physical health. But the World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And this is a diagnosis, or this is a term, a word that's been defined since 1948, and it hasn't changed since then. So if we really look at what this definition says and break it down for us, so we're talking about physical health, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about social health, and that is often overlooked when we have folks going through treatment, people who are coping with a diagnosis, people who are looking at their medical status as being the guiding light in their lives. That sometimes can obscure both mental health and social health. Any questions about that definition? Has anybody heard this definition before in this way? So there's many considerations as we go through treatment. We're looking at quality of life, we're looking at medical status or functional status. Are we able to still complete the activities of daily living? Can we shower? Can we cook? Can we drive? What can we do? And how is our diagnosis, our medical status, impacting our ability to live every day and complete the normal activities that we've been accustomed to? We, of course, look at the psychological impact. So as Dr. McCannell was saying, she works with a health psychologist. And that's actually the reason that I'm working with Dr. Hamid at the Angeles Clinic and Research Institute, is because we want to look at anxiety, because anxiety does have a physical component. It's not just a state of mind, but sometimes when we feel that we're threatened, our nervous system becomes rewired. So getting a cancer diagnosis can sometimes feel like a trauma. And that can take us back to a really threatened place where we feel that we are in flight, fight, or freeze mode more often than not. So something that may not have irritated us or caused us any worry or distress prior to diagnosis can now take on an entirely different meaning. So really looking at the impact from a psychological perspective of diagnosis and treatment. Spirituality and faith. The patients that I work with who have a spiritual orientation tend to do really well. But most of my patients have a spiritual, not religious identification. So there's some belief in something outside of ourselves. And spirituality and faith can take a beating during treatment and diagnosis. A lot of times we start to go through the stages of grief. And one of those stages is bargaining with God or questioning our spirituality, our belief system. And that is 100% part of the journey with diagnosis and treatment. Another area that often doctors won't discuss is intimacy and sexuality. So as we're patients receiving treatment, what does our intimacy look like? Do we have any sexual desire? Are we connecting with somebody in a way where we feel physically intimate, emotionally intimate? Because not all intimacy is just sexual. It can be just a touch. It can be emotional. Building those connections, that's back to our definition of health, talking about social health and that connection with ourselves and with others. And then we talk about social support. So social support is an important thing to look at. There's been studies done that say that people who have a greater amount of social support have better physical and mental health outcomes. So sometimes when we're working with a diagnosis, we would prefer to isolate. That can be, again, part of the stages of grief, where we're really withdrawing from our social connections. We're almost like a bear who's hibernating, licking our wounds. We don't want to talk to people. Sometimes we might not have the energy to speak to somebody. We might be too fatigued from treatment. There might be something that's impacting our desire to connect with friends and family, spiritual organizations, support groups. And I can tell by the fact that you're all here that you're connecting. You're reaching out. You're maintaining those social connections which are so important to find other like-minded individuals who are in the same boat, who are rowing and paddling alongside you as you go through this journey. And then, of course, another consideration is finances. So how does our treatment, our medical status, how does that impact our ability to generate income, to live in this world where finances are important? We do need to be able to earn a living in order to continue to really survive. So how is that impacted? And of course, insurance can be part of that. And lastly, employment. So are we able to work? Are we able to perform? I was speaking with a patient who has a demanding job, and she didn't feel that she was cognitively able to perform her job tasks. And so that transition from saying, hey, I don't know that I can perform the way that I performed pre-diagnosis. Do I look at disability? What do I do? What are my options? So these are all considerations that we take into account as we go through this time of working with a diagnosis. Any questions or any considerations that you feel are missing from this list? So one of the things that humans are and all living creatures are is resilient. I don't know how many of you have driven on the highways here, but on the 10 freeway, there's actually places that look like this where there's cracks in the median, but they're these little weeds, these little plants that have this thriving, this resilience to sprout up in the midst of a very busy, very unattractive highway. But you see this life. And all human beings, all human organisms, all life forms on the planet have this resiliency built in. If there's a way to thrive, then anything that's living will try to do so. So the definition of resilience is the ability to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. So if we go back to the idea that receiving a diagnosis, living with a diagnosis can be a traumatic event, but we as humans are wired to seek life. We are wired to thrive, to find a way to cope in the midst of maybe a difficult journey. So if we keep this idea that we're resilient beings and that we have a drive for life, that really informs why we're here. We're looking for answers. We're looking for coping techniques, for ways to thrive in the midst of challenges. So we just had Dr. McConnell who said, she talked about the Calm app, and she downloaded that, and that made a difference for her. She pursued meditation and mindfulness. And mindfulness is really interesting. It does rewire the nervous system that I was speaking of earlier in a way that supports health from a different perspective. So just to define mindfulness, mindfulness is actually the awareness that arises from paying attention to the present moment in a way that suspends judgment. So how many of us use should? When I should have, I should do this, I should be here, I should go there, I should eat this way, I should take this supplement, I should practice meditation. When we're using the word should, we're actually practicing judgment of ourselves. When what's really needed is self-compassion, self-kindness, and especially towards ourselves. Because many of us spend a lot of time with a really difficult narrator in our head that talks to us in a way that we would never imagine speaking to the person sitting next to us, let alone our family and friends or the people we work with. So that internal narrator, some people I've heard call it the internal dictator, can really interrupt the flow of our day, can interrupt our happiness. It can make this journey on life a lot more complicated because we're in constant judgment of ourselves. So mindfulness meditation specifically is paying attention without judgment to just the present moment with purpose. Because we spend so much time rehearsing for the future, rehashing the past, that we're often not in this moment right now. Noticing that we're surrounded by the Pacific Ocean, noticing the blue sky, noticing the palm trees outside. So we're not appreciating or giving gratitude to what's happening now because we're worried about catching a flight, getting on the highway, what happened yesterday, what this person said to me, what the doctor's going to say, what is my scan going to say. I've had more patients who really have a crisis of anxiety prior to scans. So when you lead up to scan and the worry is so present that what is the scan going to show me today? And so it can really obscure the ability to enjoy the present moment because we're so anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow or what we could have done in the past. Could I have done something to change it? And the truth is, we're alive today. We're able to breathe. We're here right now. And it's really the idea of be here now without judgment. So the purpose of mindfulness is to, as I said, increase present moment awareness. It's also to decrease the stress response in the body, to strengthen emotional responsiveness versus reactivity. And what that means is that when we're mindful in the moment, we actually create the space to choose how we want to respond to a situation. Because how many times are you driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and automatically your hand goes up in a pretty rude gesture, right? Like, or you yell at that person, what are you thinking? Oh my God. Because we go into this automatic stress response because truthfully, if we're driving on the freeways quickly, that could threaten our lives if somebody cuts us off. And the difference in a mindful response is that somebody cuts us off, we might take a breath and say, oh, maybe they're in a hurry. But what the difference is in that nanosecond, that choice between flipping somebody off and thinking in your head, oh, maybe they're in a hurry, they're having an emergency, is the hormones that get released into the body. So the stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. So the way that our nervous system is wired really allows us to make a choice when we're mindful of how we're responding to a situation versus this automatic reaction when we're raising our hand at somebody who's cut us off. Any questions about all of us drive here on the freeways? And the other thing about mindfulness, a lot of people think that mindfulness or meditation is about relaxing. And while that can be a byproduct, the truth is that mindfulness meditation is specifically about increasing the ability to focus. So if we increase the ability to focus on the present moment, that we don't get caught up in what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's really the ability to focus. If you've ever played a good game or watched something on TV or been in a movie where you're just in the moment and nothing else exists, that's the intention of mindfulness or meditation. So some of the benefits include life expectancy being extended because we're reducing the frequency of stress hormones being released in our body. Our brains, the functionality, the structure in the brain can change because our brains have something called neuroplasticity. So there are constantly new circuits being created, and that doesn't change with age. We have the ability, with practice of meditation, it's a practice, like medicine is a practice, it's something that increases with the body of knowledge and the experience over time. So doctors who are fresh out of school have less practice than doctors like Dr. Hamid, who've been practicing, and he has the wealth of experience. So practice evolves over time with medicine as it does with meditation. In addition, people who have studied, and there have been news reports and scientific reports, that other health measures such as insulin, inflammation, energy metabolism, and pain responsiveness can all be impacted by our meditation practice, by the ability to pay attention to the present moment and reduce our stress responsiveness. So mindfulness is predicated on paying attention to three things and the relationship between three different things. Our thoughts, our emotions, and our body sensations. So we might notice when we're getting ready to give a talk, right? That maybe our stomach, we have butterflies in it. Or maybe we have some tension in our shoulders, or maybe our throat, our voice is cracking a little bit. We might be rushing a little bit more than we are. So we notice that there's a sensation in our body. And that might have us have a corresponding thought. Like, oh gosh, I'm nervous about talking, or oh gosh, I'm nervous about getting to where I have to go after this on time. And that emotion that's associated with that could be, I'm anxious, I'm sad, I'm upset, I'm angry. So when we have a thought, we're going to have a corresponding body sensation, a corresponding response in the physical body. And when we have an emotion, we might have a thought or a body sensation associated with this. So this really speaks to what our previous speakers were talking about mind-body medicine, is that thoughts, emotions, and body sensations don't happen independently. Our mind and body are not separate. There's a bidirectional, tridirectional relationship between what we think, what we feel, and what goes on in our body. And that's why the doctor previously was saying that patients who are anxious have poor outcomes, or more poor outcomes than patients who can manage their anxiety in a healthy way. So this slide's a little bit hard to see, and I apologize that it's so small. But if you look at it, and if you want to take kind of a picture of it. So if you look at it, I'm going to point. So what happens is that we have an external event. So something happens, again, back to ourselves being cut off on the highway. And then we have this nervous system, right? And we go into fight or flight, and we can have a stress reaction, which can trigger the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the adrenals, the immune system, the nervous system. And then what happens after that is that the stress reaction changes a little bit. So we can have a dysregulated heart rate, we can have sleep interruptions, we can have changes in our blood pressure because of stress response. And then what happens from there is that we have poor coping. So we might make poor decisions. We might go for a comfort food. We might choose not to exercise. We might yell at somebody. We might be angry consistently. And that all impacts the internal functioning of the body. And then over time, as this pattern repeats itself, what happens is breakdown. Sometimes people will go into drugs or alcohol. They'll self-medicate in different ways. They'll check out. They won't utilize adaptive behavioral coping, so they won't make good choices that support their health because they're in this stress response that we're seeing right here. And if you look on the right-hand side, by adding in mindfulness, mindfulness allows the stress response to be a response versus a reaction. And what happens in that case is that our bodies are more regulated. That's adaptive coping. We're applying a behavioral coping mechanism, in this case mindfulness, to allow the nervous system to return to homeostasis more quickly. So if we look at the board, what do you see on this side here?
A vase and two faces.
A vase and two faces. Anybody else?
Faces.
Faces. So who saw a vase first? And who saw the faces first? Right. So same room, same picture, same perspective, but two different perspectives, right, of what we're seeing. On this side, what do you see? A girl? An old lady. So who saw the young girl first? And who sees the old lady?
I don't see the old lady.
The old lady, here's her eye, here's her nose,
Yeah.
here's her chin.
Oh, I see her now.
Right? So all of us are looking at the same photographs, the same images, but we have the ability to see different things. So just by shifting our perspective, what we're looking at can change. And that is the intention of mindfulness, is the ability to notice that our perspective, maybe we're stuck. Somebody was talking about the patterns of behavior in the back of our mind. So when we practice mindfulness, we practice meditation, this allows our perspective, our perception to shift. So maybe there might be an alternative explanation about why somebody said something to us that caused us an anxiety response. Maybe there's another way to cope with something that's happening at the doctor's office, in our bodies, in our home life, at work. So it's about noticing our perception, noticing our perspective of the event, and realizing there might be an alternative way to look at things, just like you can with the vase and the faces and the old and young lady. So mindfulness is not something that you necessarily just have to sit on a cushion to practice. Mindfulness can be applied to physical activities, to social interactions, to what you choose to take in the media. And this is a very important one in the times in which we live. There's so much fear-mongering happening right now on every platform, on Facebook, on the TV news, on the cable news, even in the movies that are made, in the TV shows that are made. There's so much anxiety in our culture today, in our society, that by being mindful of what we allow ourselves to expose ourselves to, so if we're lying in bed at night and just flipping through Facebook or Instagram or the internet or whatever we're looking at, we can actually end up really harming our nervous system because it's getting activated. Every headline we read could be really activating. So noticing, just in a mindful way without judgment, what media am I allowing myself to take in? So it's actually part of what happens. What am I listening to on the radio? What commercials am I hearing? So all of these things are really important. Our emotions. So noticing just the trajectory of our emotions throughout the day. Maybe in the morning we're happy, then after lunch we're tired, and in the evening we're relieved. But just noticing where we are emotionally, and that goes back to the triangle of awareness, noticing our emotions, our thoughts, and our body sensations. And then on to, of course, our diet, our nutrition. So practicing mindful eating, noticing what we're putting in our body to fuel our bodies, noticing our fashion, how are we presenting ourselves to the world, just being mindful of how are we showing up and how are we receiving people. How are people responding to us? And how do we respond to others based on their fashion or how they look? And making time to take in art, beauty, and culture. Now, this is something that's not often emphasized in our society today, but art, beauty, and culture. This is something that over the millennia, many cultures have focused on. Is if you look at the Moorish culture, the beautiful artisanry that they had in their buildings, if you look at the Greek and the Romans, they all paid attention to art, beauty, and culture as important parts of the society in order to really allow ourselves to enjoy something. Because if you smell a beautiful flower or see something beautiful, that changes our physiology. It has an impact on our body when we are in a space of openness and appreciation to beauty. And one that's not on the list is play. A lot of times we don't make time for play in our day, and play is just as important as being productive, of working, loving, and practicing kindness, but playfulness, enjoyment, these are things that are very important. So I'm going to do a short 3-minute practice with you. I use the image of an hourglass for this. This is a very quick breathing space that we can do. So if you're sitting in your chair right now, your feet on the floor, and just becoming aware of the chair underneath your thighs, noticing the support of the ground beneath you. If you want, sometimes physically focusing on your body sensations can be easier with your eyes closed. So as you notice the sensations in your body, the feeling of your clothes against your skin, the temperature of the air against your arms, your hands, noticing if there's any smells in the room, and beginning to notice the rate of your breathing, and noticing the sound of my voice as you begin to notice what breath feels like in your body. So you notice the air coming in your nose, traveling down your throat, expanding your chest, and noticing if the air goes all the way down your throat, your lungs to expand into your belly. And noticing the breath as it exits your body from the belly, up the lungs, the upper chest, and then again up the throat and out the nose or the mouth. So just noticing several cycles of your breath, following the sensations of the air. You might even be able to hear your breath as well as feel it. And just paying attention to your breathing, trying to bring the air all the way down to your tummy. And then allowing the breath to journey back out. And one more cycle of breath. So you notice the breath as it comes in the nose or mouth, traveling down the throat, expanding the upper mid chest, down into your belly and out again. And slowly beginning to develop awareness again, expanding it back out to the sensations of the chair beneath your thighs, against your back, feeling your bottom in the chair, noticing the position of your arms, your forearms, your wrists, your fingers, and feeling the floor beneath your feet. Noticing if your eyes are closed, beginning to hear the sounds in the room. And beginning to just wiggle your fingers and toes, opening your eyes, and expanding your awareness once more to the entire room. So how did you feel that breathing space? Was that something that was easy to do? To just kind of, what we did is we started with an open awareness. We brought it back in, so the middle of the hourglass just to the breath. And then we opened awareness back up to every sensation. Yeah?
I almost couldn't move my arms or feet until you said, start wiggling. I was like, oh my God, am I gonna be, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a gentle way to come back, right? Sometimes you can just focus so much on narrowing the breath, it just gives you that quiet moment. So if you're going into a challenging situation or any time, a conversation where you're sitting with your family and you just need a minute of peace, you can take just a few minutes. And it doesn't take a 45-minute meditation on a cushion in a meditation room to focus the attention, to change the nervous system, and to just take that break that you might need before you continue on with your day. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to take a nap, but doing something like this can really refocus our attention in a very short amount of time. Something that I also will do is that maybe before I walk into a room, I might just put my hand on the door that I'm about to go in and just take a breath. Just be mindful of taking my next breath, taking it all the way in, and then going on. It's a 30-second pause, if that, before you proceed. And just taking those moments throughout the day can really have an impact on our nervous system, especially if we tend to be oriented towards being anxious. So really just thinking about that, where can I incorporate maybe a 3-minute breathing space, or even something different that is mindful, that is focused attention into my day. Anybody else have an experience they want to share with that 3-minute breath? So the next part we're going to move on to from the mindfulness conversation is about purpose, meaning, and legacy. And the reason why purpose matters is that it can actually really inform our health. So when we have a purpose in life, a reason for meaning, something that keeps us here on the planet, a desire to thrive, a desire to live a purposeful life, that can actually reduce cardiovascular events, it can reduce causes of mortality when we have a purpose. And if we expand that into meaning, enhancing a meaning in our lives, how we function as humans is that we are meaning-making machines. So, as the previous doctor referred to, and we'll talk a little bit about Viktor Frankl, he was a gentleman who was a psychiatrist who lost his family in the Holocaust, and he had the challenge of making meaning in a very difficult environment. But when he enhanced meaning, he was able to think about his resilience. He was able to notice what was going on, but the difference is he was choosing not to suffer. And this was an active choice in the face of tremendous pain, tremendous loss, hurt, physical, mental, and emotional. So there was an ability to make meaning that allowed him to be present with the pain, but to choose not to suffer. And when we lose meaning in our life, we have poor experience. What can happen is that our social roles might change with our diagnosis and our disease process. Our relationships might change when we're facing the unknown. Back to the scan result, we're facing the unknown of what's going to happen next. Is the treatment working? If we have a thought around leaving a legacy, around choosing our experiences mindfully, then loss of meaning is less apt to happen. So really focusing on the meaning that we're making out of each event will allow us to make a choice in how we respond to that event. Creating a legacy, it really is not just about death and dying. Creating a legacy is, how do we want to leave an imprint on the planet? None of us knows how much time we have, but doing work or showing up in a way with our families, to ourselves, showing up in a way that allows us to choose to live a life that we want to live and to leave the world a way that we want to share with our friends, family, and humanity. So it enables us to fully live in the present when we think about what kind of imprint are we leaving on the planet? What kind of legacy are we leaving for our friends, our family, and the people that we know? So that really dovetails into connection. So one of the things that happens often during treatment or when we're struggling with a medical status concern is loneliness and social isolation. Social disconnection is correlated with really much more poor physical and mental health outcomes. And it's really important to think about, how can we connect with people? Sometimes we don't know what the next step could be. But there are organizations such as this one, there are events such as this one, there are other organizations in Southern California and throughout the country that can help support us. Some people choose to focus on diagnosis and choose to connect socially that way, through boards online, through these type of events. Some people choose to connect through hobbies, through spiritual orientations and belief systems, through mindfulness groups or yoga, through different activities that really revolve around connection. So even going to a yoga class, for example, could be a way to connect with other like-minded people. Attending events like this, making connections during these few days that we're together. So this connection can support not only mental health, but also physical health. So connection is subjective. There's some of us who are completely content with one or two really close friends, and that's all we need. Others of us are more interested in large groups, so that actually can really speak to our personality styles. Some introverts are more interested in connecting alone or with just a few people. People who are extroverted might enjoy large groups and recharge around large groups of people. So it's beginning the process of knowing what supports your health. Do you feel energized with lots of people? Do you feel depleted with lots of people? So what works for you? And being mindful of the people with whom you spend time. If you're feeling depleted when you're spending time with a certain person, then maybe that's somebody you choose, to be mindful of how much time you spend with. But if you feel energized with another person or with a pet or with an activity or a group of people, then certainly that's something you might want to incorporate more of. And then of course, connection with your body, which is really difficult for our patients and for our team, because when we're struggling with any kind of diagnosis, we might feel a betrayal by our body. And when we feel that our body has betrayed us in some way because there's a disease process at play, we might not be building a connection or relationship with our body. And our body is the source of wisdom, back to the triangle of awareness. Our body sensations are a signal to us of how we're feeling. And it's really important to think about, what am I putting in my body? How am I moving my body? We have a picture of Tai Chi up here. Is Tai Chi or yoga great for us, or do we want to walk? Do we want to swim? What does my body need? And so many of us spend a lot of time disconnected from our body that we don't know the answer to this question. So it's really having a gentle curiosity without judgment about, what does my body need today? What would support my health? Do I need more rest? Do I need less rest? But it really can improve our quality of lives, developing that connection. And then of course, connection with our providers. So the medical process a lot of times has been, and still is, a hierarchical process. There's a certain degree of disconnection formality because we call doctors doctor. And so what that does is it doesn't necessarily put us on an even playing field. But what really improves our health-related quality of life is establishing a rapport, a relationship where our doctors, where we tell them what exactly is going on for us. Because if we don't tell our doctor, hey, I'm struggling with the depression, I found I'm more tired, I'm not sleeping well, I'm so anxious and wound up that I can't really talk to my family without screaming at them. And it's at that point where in our clinic, I get a referral. But if you're not in a clinic that has a social worker or a health psychologist, that you might want to reach out to one. But establishing the ability to be truthful and let your doctor know what's really going on for you, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally, is really key to a whole body approach, a mind-body approach to health and wellness. Because if we're not communicating with our doctor, we can have increased psychological distress, but nobody knows because we haven't said it out loud. So there are resources available to you. There are people who want to support you. If you're not comfortable telling your doctor, let somebody know, or you can call your health insurance company and say, hey, what kind of mental health benefits do I have? I feel like I need to talk to somebody. I'm struggling with coping, not only with my physical diagnosis, but I'm struggling with anxiety. Grief is a real process that does happen, as I mentioned, during this. So going through sadness, depression, bargaining, denial, acceptance, it's not a linear process and it doesn't end. So it's something that we allow ourselves to notice that it can be a struggle to cope with a diagnosis. And so in the midst of the diagnosis, let your providers know so that there are fewer stressors, fewer life disruptions, and you have that support. And we're going to move on to laughter. So as I mentioned, play. So play and laughter are an important part of health. There's actually something called laughter yoga. Has anybody here done laughter yoga? You can Google it online. And here's the thing. In the beginning, when we start out with laughter yoga, the beginning of the process is to just start laughing. Now, in the beginning, our body doesn't know the difference between a fake laugh or a fake smile. And then suddenly, somehow, it becomes real. And so even if you Google it on YouTube and you do it online alone in the privacy of your home, it can have a positive impact on your mood. So even if you're just sitting here in your chair right now, put a smile on your face. See how that feels. Do you feel that in your body? Do you feel a difference if you put a smile on your face versus having just kind of a frown or a midpoint expression? But intentionally putting the smile, even if it feels super fake and awkward, can have a beneficial impact on our bodies, on our mood, on our thoughts and emotions. So if you don't have a class near you where you can try laughter yoga, certainly try it online. You can go to humor clubs or comedy clubs, watch something funny, but laughter can be really beneficial, especially if you're not able to get out of the house, if you're feeling fatigued on a day, watch something funny. Go watch a video of laughter yoga. See how that feels and see if that's something that works for you. There are a million physiological benefits to laughter. Muscle relaxation, it changes your heart rate, your nervous system, your blood pressure, your oxygen saturation. It can really impact your stress markers, and it can work with pain. So if you're struggling with pain, laughter can be something that can be helpful to mitigate the pain response in the body. Additionally, of course, as I mentioned, mood, reduction of stress, depression, and anxiety symptoms. A decrease in hostility, because sometimes we can just be really irritable, and irritability is an overlooked symptom of depression. So irritability, short temper, those can be indications that you're struggling with depression. And struggling to adjust to a new lifestyle, a diagnosis, all of these things. But of course, quality of life and well-being are improved with laughter. So, takeaways. So one of the things that I would love to have you take away is, how can we incorporate mindfulness into the daily routine? There are a couple different apps. Dr. McCannell mentioned Calm. Another app that I recommend regularly to our clients is the Insight Timer app. It has a ton of free content. It has for sleep free meditations, it has for anxiety meditations. So anything you can think of that you might want help, or you might want to listen to a guided meditation, Insight Timer is a great app for that, as well as Calm. They have free content as well as purchase content, and Headspace is another app that people use. Incorporating a sense of legacy, of meaning, of purpose into life. Really being conscious about, how do I want to show up in the world? And being mindful of our perceptions. Back to the picture of the old and the young woman and the faces in the vase. If I'm looking at a situation in one way, is there another way? Is there something else that I can see if I just change my perspective on the situation or the relationship or the mood? So if you're stuck in a down mood, if I put a smile on my face, as silly as that might feel, does that change my mood? If I stand up and walk around the room, does that change my mood? And connection. Connecting with other people in a way that supports your personality style, your needs, in groups or in smaller groups with 1 or 2 people, online, on some of the support groups. Whatever way that really speaks to you, but finding a way to connect. And then, of course, seeking support and developing relationships with your providers so that they can support your health in more than just the physical. So locally, there's many resources. How many people are from Southern California? And everybody else from other places in the United States? Okay. Well, locally we have Cedars-Sinai Survivorship Program, UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center, the Sims-Mann Center, Dr. McCannell works with, Cancer Support Communities. That's a national organization, WeSpark. For meditation, there's Shambhala Meditation Center. There's a beautiful labyrinths and gardens. So mindfulness can be a walking meditation. And finding a local mindfulness church, maybe through your Y or through a spiritual organization, but usually most locations do have mindfulness centers available. There in LA, there's Insight LA Unplugged Meditation, and I mentioned the 3 mindfulness apps. Of course, looking for laughter yoga classes online, and looking at YouTube content. And I just want to give a thanks to 2 of my colleagues at Cedars-Sinai, Dr. Asher and Wertheimer, who have supported me in developing this presentation. So any questions? Anything that works for you that I haven't mentioned that helps really to reduce stress?
I do art therapy.
Art
There's
therapy.
Cancer Research Center. It's
Wonderful.
all free.
Where's the Breast Cancer Research Center?
It's not a breast cancer, it's just a HERS.
Oh, the Hearst Cancer.
Research or Resource Center.
Okay.
In San Luis Obispo.
Okay, in San Luis
And
Obispo.
there's one in Santa Maria, and now one in Arroyo Grande, and it's cancer support, and they do art classes, acupuncture, wellness, it's all free.
That's wonderful. So Arroyo Grande, Santa Maria,
And San Luis Obispo.
and San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
So
If you
more,
need gas money, they'll give you gas money to get to your doctor's.
and they provide gas money. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, art therapy is wonderful. Back to art, beauty, and culture, and really incorporating that in some way. I know this month there's a lot of free museum days happening in Southern California. So if you happen to be here, you might be able to take advantage of that. Yeah.
I'm really lucky. I live in Palo Alto, which is in the Bay Area.
Yes.
And I had breast cancer a year before my eye, so I became aware of kind of, a lot of cancer resources. And there's an organization called Bay Area Cancer Connections.
Bay Area Cancer Connections.
And they have they have mindfulness, they have guided imagery, they have a Pilates class, fitness classes, all kinds of stuff, and for free.
Right.
Stanford has what's called their continuing care program for anybody with cancer. You don't have to be a Stanford patient even.
So Stanford Continuing Care, and I'm just repeating so we're recording this so people can know these resources.
And they have like 4 days a week, they have yoga and exercise classes, so I do like a restorative, I can't do the pose, I can do restorative yoga, so that's very cool. And, it's so much is out there available if you go out and avail yourself of it. And the Bay Area Cancer Connection says they have writing, writing your story, art classes like you're talking about. So I think looking to the broader cancer support community, not just OM, many places will have a lot of resources.
Right, so definitely looking to the broader cancer community for support resources. Narrative therapy, the writing therapy that you mentioned, could be a legacy activity. So writing your story and having that as a legacy, when it's down on paper and sharing with your friends, your family, is a beautiful therapy. And if you find somebody who does that, there's other therapy approaches if you do seek counseling and mental health therapy. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT therapy, is a beautiful theory. And if you find somebody who practices that, it can really be a wonderful thing to be able to do. Cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of people talk about. Trauma-informed therapy, I really like, because again, if that looks at the diagnosis being a traumatic event and how that works inside the body, and then how that's correlated with mental health. So there's a lot of different approaches to therapy. So I love art therapy, expressive therapies. So, yep.
Right now I'm working on a My Cancer Journey book.
My Cancer Journey book.
A book, yeah, scrapbook, and it's therapeutic and healing.
Yeah, definitely. So creating that, again, back to the legacy activities, so the Cancer Journey scrapbook. Wonderful. Anything else?
I get a massage and go to acupuncture once a week.
I love that.
I prioritize myself because I need that.
Yeah, acupuncture and massage. So incorporating that physical relaxation. So whatever that looks like. And acupuncture is wonderful. Massage is great for physical touch too, and that reconnection with the body. I think my time is up, so thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time today.